in this Photoshop tutorial, we're going to be modifying a comic strip. We're going to learn how to copy and paste an image, clean up that image, some tools for navigating around that image easily. We're going to make a new layer. We're going to use the Polygonal Lasso tool and the Fill tool to clean the image up. Then we're going to use the Text tool to change the text in it and make it say whatever we want. And then we're going to save it as a Photoshop document so it could be edited more later, and then also as a JPEG so it's easy to share. The first step is to open your file. Clicking open, and then click the file that you wish to edit. You may have to navigate a little bit to find where your image is. Here's the image in the middle. Bottom right hand corner is our layers tab. We have a color picker up here on the top right. We have a handful of tools down the left side, and then we have some menus across the top. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to zoom in a little bit so it fills our screen. If you use your mouse wheel, you're going to notice that it doesn't really zoom anything. However, if you hold the Alt key on your keyboard and then scroll your mouse, you can now zoom in. If I'm zoomed in enough that I need to navigate around, holding the spacebar allows me to move around. All right, there's a bunch of text on here that I don't need, so it's time to clean that up. I'm going to start cleaning up by making a new layer. Hitting this plus in the bottom right corner next to the trash can creates a new layer and names it Layer 1. I'm going to rename this layer by double-clicking it and call it Background. This is what I'm going to use to fill in all the text that I don't want. Ensuring that I'm on the background layer that I just made, I click it and it will be gray. Next, I'm going to come up to the top left and find the Polygonal Lasso tool. If it's not the default selection there, if we click and hold, we can see we have a lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool. For what we're doing right now, the polygonal lasso tool is the one to choose. I select it by letting go once my mouse is over it. Now I need to make some selections. I'm going to zoom in a little bit by holding Alt and using the scroll wheel, and then using the mouse to position the picture so it's nice and centered. This isn't essential, but I like what I'm working on to be in the middle. Now, with my Polygonal Lasso tool, I'm going to click once to start it, and you'll notice that it kind of drags a line along behind it. Every time I click again, it places a point that that line will come from. I can go around my text boxes and fully select my text. I can finish my selection by making a closed shape. I can either click on the beginning of this polygon that I've drawn, or when I'm close and it's a nice straight line between the point I'm at and where I want to be, I can double click. I'm going to double check I'm on my layer that I made, and then I'm going to use the Fill tool. The Fill tool can be found under this Gradient tool. If you see like a black to a white gradient, if you click and hold it, you can find the Paint Bucket tool. When I come over here and I click inside of my selection, it fills it in. But that is not the color I wanted. I really want it to match this white background. As everyone's comic might be different, this background might not always be perfectly white. So the white I choose might not blend in. Don't worry though, there's an easy way to pick up this exact color of the background. I'm going to go to the Eyedropper tool. It looks kind of like a little dropper for dispensing medicine. If you click the Eyedropper tool, then click in a spot that has the color you would like to place over your text to make it look like there's no text there. That's a fancy way of saying click where the white is. Once I have that selected, then I can go back and use my Paint Bucket tool and then fill in. Now you'll notice because my first filling in was a dark color, my second filling in didn't quite get rid of all of it. This is a great chance for me to use the undo. Undo can be done with Control Z or Edit, Undo, and I can step back twice. Now when I use my paint bucket tool, it fills it in. I'm going to get rid of this dancing dotted line by going up to Select and Deselect. That looks pretty good. Now it's time to repeat that for the rest of it. All right, that looks pretty good. I am zooming out by holding the Alt key again and using the scroll wheel. We can check to see the difference we've made by clicking the little eye next to the background. And here we can see that when I click the eye off, the original text appears. Clicking the eye on again hides it. Now it's time to put some text in here. This may be the single toughest part of this assignment. What do we put in there? Now it's time to use the text tool. Coming over here, the text tool you can see is with a letter T. When I click that, our top menu changes, and you may get a secondary menu. If you don't see the secondary menu, come over here and look to the right, and you will see an A with a vertical line next to it. That gives us our character information. This is where we can make a lot of decisions about how our text will look. With the text tool, I can click and drag a box that is about the size I want my text to be. You'll notice that there is some text that kind of popped up in there automatically, but it's hard to read. And the reason for that is it's white text on a white background. I can change that by either coming up to the top and clicking this white box, or over to the character and clicking this white box. There I can set my color. It is now much easier to read, but it's looking kind of large. Coming over here, I can click and drag on the little t and the big T. If you click and drag on these, it's a shortcut to allow you to scroll to figure out the right size. If you have a specific size in mind, you can either click, select, and then type it in. I'm going to click somewhere else to see that change. Or you can use this drop-down menu. Notice that it put in some default text. That is to allow us to make a whole bunch of changes and not have to worry about typing in something right away. If I accidentally click off on this text and it's no longer selected, as long as I have my text tools selected, I can double click on the text and it will put us back in that text box. I'm going to now type in my hilarious beginning of my joke. My text doesn't fit, so I'm going to select all of my text. And to do that, I'm going to use a shortcut, Control A. And then I'm going to adjust my text size till the whole joke fits. When I'm done with this text box, I can either click into the gray or I can click the checkbox along the top. Let's look down at our layers. We can see that it made a new layer with our text tool. It has a T to indicate that it is a text layer, and then it has some of the text that I typed there. This is to make finding specific layers a lot easier, especially if you have a lot of text. I'm going to repeat my steps to finish the rest of my joke. I'm going to, with the text tool selected, click and drag about how big I want the text box to be. If the words are too big or illegible, I can either change the color or change the size, and then I can type my joke. My text is a bit small, so I'm going to select it all. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. That's looking pretty good. Hitting the checkbox finishes my text. This text isn't quite in the right spot, so I want to move it. To do that, I can go up to the top left and grab the Move tool. Notice it currently says Auto Select. This can be a bit of a bummer because it's going to try and automatically select whatever you click on. If I'm trying to move this text and I miss and I click down here, even though I wasn't on the layer where I did all this work, it's now grabbed it. I'm going to use Control-Z to undo that. If you want to make sure it only grabs stuff on the layer you're working on, you can turn off Auto Select. But then remember, you're gonna have to click which layer you want to move. I want to move, is this why we're told to go outside? I can click that layer and then I can move it. But if you have Auto Select on, as long as you're careful, you can move anything on any layer just by carefully clicking it and not missing. One last thing to do is we want to save it. When we save, if we go to File, Save, the first option it's going to give us is this PSD object. This PSD object, or file type, is really, really useful for something you want to keep working on, or something you might want to make a change later. This will save all of the layers, and it'll save some other information as well, allowing you to go back and make changes to this document. So I'm going to save it as a Photoshop document first. But I also want to be able to share this. So I'm going to save it as a different way. This time when I click File, I want to click Export. And then we get a whole bunch more options. I want to export as. Now this gives us a bunch of options and a preview of what it's going to look like, as well as a file size. For my format, I want a JPEG because JPEGs are super universal. Everything can read a JPEG. And we can see that my file size dropped somewhat. As a PNG, it was 234 kilobytes. As a JPEG, it is less than half of that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make sure that my quality is still looking pretty good. If I'm worried about my file size, I can adjust this quality slider down. But when we go down to the worst quality, you're going to notice there are some blocking and JPEG artifacts. This might be something you want to intentionally put in because you think they're funny. I don't really like the look of them, so I'm going to turn it up till, I can't really tell they're there. Or what is there was already there when I started this. That looks great. We could adjust the image size if we needed to. We could make it a little bit smaller, but I don't need to do any of that. I'm happy with it, so I'm going to click Export. When I get Export, now I get the chance to rename it. I'm going to keep it the same name, and I'm going to click Save. That's it. It's exported my image, and when it's done, it will close that menu. In this tutorial, we learned how to use some selection tools, how to use the text tool. We learned how to use make some layers, as well as rename layers to help keep things organized. We also learned how to save our file as a Photoshop document and a JPEG.